Welcome to Power Politics, where we prepare you for your next political conversation. I'm Jeronimo Cortina, political science professor at the University of Houston.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, also a political science professor here at the University of Houston. Thanks for hanging out with us and talking about politics on a whirlwind week, day, hour. It's insanity. We are trying our best to keep up. There's just a lot. We're going to try to give you a kind of 10,000-foot view and talk about some of the context that matters here, but there's just a lot. So We're going to do our best to try to cover everything, national and Texas. First up, obviously, is trade wars. It's like a Star Wars prequel in here. It's just all about trade.
Right.
But the politics of it are really interesting, right? So obviously, people have been following this, but just a kind of quick update, Donald Trump has pushed emergency sanctions to justify punishing imports of Canadian goods and Mexican goods. He cut a deal to basically pause that for a little bit. We'll talk about in a second. But the 10% tariffs on Chinese imports does hold. What does this mean for kind of the economy? What does it mean for the politics of Donald Trump? Let's get into it.
Well, one first thing is that markets and investors, they don't like uncertainty.
Oh, yeah.
Markets
were a little rumbly.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they were. And they hate that, right? And also in the future, when big companies are going to make investments, they tend to be very hesitant to say, like, okay, if I'm going to do X, is the deal going to hold?
Okay. Or
they're going to change in 30 minutes after I invest. So they are very, and that has important implications.
You make a great point. Things happen fast, right?
Yes.
Like they, it's been a long time coming, right? Because Trump ran on this, so it's not like a surprise. But like there's a threat, then they negotiate the threat away.
Correct.
And in the meantime, there's this kind of, market churn.
So this can work, and apparently might be working
it did work, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Sort
for
of.
President Trump. But you cannot use the same playbook over and over. We're in week 3.
Yeah.
So it's becoming a point that is next time you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
Because people are finding out that this may be a bluff. This is just a way for the Trump administration to extract something from governments. I mean, from Mexico, yes, 10,000 troops going to the U.S.-Mexico border to control fentanyl and perhaps undocumented crossings. Canada as well. But there's going to be a point where countries are going to say, enough of this bluff.
But
like,
I think
we're going to call your bluff.
I think we're there, though, right? I mean, Trump is using tariffs as a sort of all-purpose solution to economic problems, political problems. So that it was only going to go so far before the country start to say, like, well, wait a minute, we can give you a little something and then have it basically go away. And that's kind of what happened, right? I mean, depends on how you spin this, right? The White House is saying, okay, these companies, these countries basically caved, right? Made the threat for the tariffs, and the countries came through with additional borders, security, some money for border protection. But that was something that was already promised, right? So, like in particular, for the case of Canada, right, they're implementing a border plan that they already agreed to implement. Yeah. Mexico is going to offer 10,000 troops to the border, but this already agreed to Joe Biden's demands basically in April of 21. So it's sort of working, but maybe these leaders are figuring out that they can bluff a little bit, kind of offer you a little bit of a trinket, and it's going to work. I guess that's the question is like, what's the reality here, right? What is really happening for the Trump White House? Is this a win for them or not?
I mean, it is kind of a win because it's whacked the dog's tail, right? Yeah. Remember that movie?
Totally, I love that movie.
And it's just pretending that something that you did is actually working. As you said, they have already committed on the one hand. The Trump administration, in terms of immigration policy, is not doing anything radically different than what the Biden administration is. When you look at the numbers that Biden deported, those are one of the highest numbers of any president in modern history. Yeah. So he deported a lot of people, right? So again, it's how you depict it, right? Yeah. And the important thing is to give, I guess, win public opinion battle and send a signal to your base that, hey, I'm doing what you voted for.
It could be that it takes a little while to settle in because the China battle is still ongoing.
Oh, yeah.
There are some Republicans who think that Donald Trump is not hard enough on China, so this will basically test their mettle. But the Chinese government came back with tariffs of 10 to 15% on U.S. imports of natural gas, coal, crude oil, farm equipment. Beijing is also opening up an antitrust suit against Google. So there will be a kind of dribble effect here where there could be some implications. And I guess my question is, in addition to sort of the politics of all this in terms of public opinion, is like, will the Republicans hold the line when things get really tight? The gap here, the delay for implementing tariffs on Mexico and Canada, if they ever come, is that it gives John Thune, the majority leader and a Republican, time to put a bill together to protect farm states from some of the problems that might come as a result of these tariffs. So the little bit of a cushion here is probably good for them. But how long will Republicans hold out? The other question is like whether the Democrats are able to kind of rally around this moment.
Where are they?
The opposition party, the blue team. They have a like donkey.
Like that, they're completely absent, right?
That's a great point. And actually, I want to make this exact point with respect to Texas and the state of the state. But I think that they're waiting and trying to bide their time because they don't know what's going to happen, right? The kind of constant chaos of it isn't really good for the economy, as you say. And they're trying to basically put this on Donald Trump. And I think they're kind of almost begging him to do this because they know the implications could be really severe and grave for the economy. So they're like asking him to do this, which is odd because here we have basically like sort of politicians saying that they would like something to happen that is knowingly going to be bad for the economy, but it's going to hurt their political opponent. That's the height of apoplectic polarization. So I do think that kind of slight pushback is probably relevant, but at the same time, they've not been as vocal as perhaps they could have been on this. Why?
Well, I don't know. And I think we're seeing the same repeat of the campaign. Donald Trump is speaking and his administration is speaking in very clear terms, right? It's saying this agency is corrupt. Period. Who doesn't understand that? There's no one in this world that does not understand that. And then on the other hand, you listen to Democrat leaders and this is anti-constitutional. This is a constitutional crisis. This is a fight against the fall down of democracy and the principles of the Federalist Papers. And it's okay. Like, sure.
The Federalist what?
I mean, people do not understand that. Because we have never had a constitutional crisis. If you were talking to Mexico, you were talking in other countries, even in France, people understand the consequences of meddling down and having a constitutional crisis. Here, we haven't had one in hundreds of years.
Like the Reign of Terror.
Exactly. So people, it's like, sure, whatever. They're not used to that type of language. And it's, once again, 10,000 feet above everybody's heads. And like, sure.
Well, no, that makes sense. Like, but the third story of this event is always like, what's the rules on this, right? The first story is always like, what's the reaction and then what's the impact politically? And then it's like, well, what's the rules here? And that to me is the most interesting story because there are fail-safes on a lot of these things. So for instance, the president is using a particular act, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to basically justify this. That act requires a number of things. First is that there's a strong connection between what the emergency is and then what the solution is. And the question for Congress and really maybe the courts will be whether or not the president's outcome here, whether the tariff implementation is connected strongly to the fentanyl crisis or to the kind of undocumented border crossing crisis. It's not clear that it is, but that's what presidents have to do. And I think the real crisis here, the Democrats could point out, is that like Congress already has the law in place. The law is very clear. I spent a lot of time writing about rules and trade rules in particular. And one of the things you find is that basically these laws are all like, they have fail-safes. They have kind of cutouts so that like Congress can come back and say, well, look, we don't think the emergency exists the way that you do, so we're going to go ahead and limit that. It requires very little. All it requires them to do is to sort of basically have a joint resolution in both houses. But wait, what do you mean?
President Trump has control over Congress.
And control is the key word, right?
Yes, control over Congress. If a institutional member of Congress, whether it's in the House and the Senate, says like, I think Professor Rottinghaus is right. And yes, I read the law.
I get those emails all the time.
Of course. It's annoying.
It's really embarrassing.
I think we should have a joint resolution. What's going to happen? If you go against my will, you will be primary out. There are going to be consequences.
Yeah, maybe they're quite. Yeah, no, it's a great point. But what I mean to say is that in context, like this is only a crisis in as much as people are kind of willing to execute. And the Congress has to step up here. You made a kind of reference to another issue that happened this week, and that's the USAID, which is the agency that does international development. They basically got shuttered. People showed up for work, and the people at the door were like, sorry, we're closed. And they were like, wait a minute, we work here. That is a problem in the sense that there's this legacy here where Elon Musk and the Department of Energy, and if you're listening to this and not watching it, I'm putting air quotes around Department of Energy because there's no formal process through which they can do this. So that is a different kind of crisis, a real kind of crisis where it is the case that the president and Congress have to work together to solve what legislatively they want to do with USAID instead of just sort of saying, well, don't come to work anymore tomorrow.
Right. That's
not a solution to this. The other connection here is that there are a lot of people who are worried about Elon Musk. Now, obviously, he's been in the news, very vocal about things. Treasury seemed to have given him access to some confidential information, which is potentially problematic. But you do see Democrats on that pushing back, right? The trade issue is one thing because that may or may not happen. It may not come about the way they think it will. But this is a different kind of problem where, number one, they may have violated laws. That is the laws on cybersecurity, Privacy Act laws.
Yeah.
But the optics of having Elon Musk and these technocrats, these 20-year-olds who were basically helping him.
I think they just graduated high school, some of them.
Right. Which I don't discount their skills, for sure, that's great. But the worry is that then that's what Democrats are using. So I guess my question to you is this, after a long prelude, and that's how is it that Democrats are adequately affecting the kind of change here? Is USAID going to be an issue they can win on? Is the constitutional separation of powers story something they can win on? Are they adequately putting Elon Musk at the corner of this and saying that's a huge problem politically for Donald Trump?
No, and no.
Good.
Right. Because
I like a succinct answer for sure.
The constitutional question is going to be resolved at the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And we know that they're going to be playing a huge role. There is a number of case law from the 1930s that prohibits the president to do what he's attempting to do. But we know since the campaign that this was the strategy.
Right, yeah.
The Trump administration wants to get to the court because the final prize, and you said it last week, is this unitary executive doctrine, right?
Yeah.
How much power can the president have based on Article 2 of the Constitution? That's the end game. Yeah. So what they're doing is they're doing this potentially illegal maneuvering, USAID, this and that. Yeah. Low-hanging fruits. USAID doesn't have huge implications for domestic public policy.
It's 1% of the federal budget or something.
Nothing,
really small.
Right? So, but it is a very good test case to go to the Supreme Court. The big question here is, well, we have in July the Supreme Court ruling that, yes, when you're president, you cannot be basically you can do whatever you want to do. Yeah. And there's not going to be any legal consequences.
As long as it's within the confines of your job, right?
Whatever that means, right? But sure, good enough. So the next step is to see how far the Supreme Court is willing to go. Yeah. Because this is complete obliteration of separation of powers and obliteration of Congress and saying, Congress says X, I'm the president, and I say Y, and I don't care what you say.
Yeah, this is not like drilling a hole in the wall. This is like Kool-Aid Man style, busting through the wall, destroying these things. Yeah. And I don't know that the courts are willing to go that far. Now, how far they're willing to go, we'll see. That's a different matter that we'll no doubt take up in the future. But for sure, it's the case that this is going to be an issue that they're going to have to resolve. So as it is now, they're still kind of churning through all these things. And we are too, right? I mean, I think part of what we've seen the last few weeks is that just the rapidity of information, the kind of frequency of it is really causing havoc with the system. And I think, you're right to criticize Democrats for saying, we don't know what to do here. We don't know what kind of avenue to pick. But it's hard because there are so many different things that are happening. So I think that's a real crisis that Democrats are facing as a kind of political entity.
Correct. And I'll give you this, and I'll give these to the Democrats, is inaction is also a form of political or public policy retaliation.
Interesting,
so inaction may be, as you say, excuse me, you're going down to the precipice, you're 5 feet away from falling down, and he's like, all right.
Or what they did is they put up a warning sign like a few years ago, caution cliff, and they're like, we're not going to listen to you. So you want to go off the cliff, that's on you.
Yeah.
And that's why I mean is earlier, the Democrats are basically almost like asking Trump to do this because they know it's going to backfire.
Maybe.
So that has implications, though, economically for everybody, not just kind of Trump supporters.
Yeah.
So I hate that we're at the point now where we have this sort of affective polarization. We just hate each other so much that like we can't kind of try to come to some resolution here. But the way that this is shaping out is definitely going to be pretty hectic, at least for a little while longer. And I don't know how much longer. I mean, I think that's what people at home are thinking is like, you know, how long are we expected to sort of have this information overload? And my guess is it'll slow down. Like after the first 100 days, I think that, you know, wanted a real rush here. The president wants to make a big splash at this sort of State of the Union, in quotes, that is going to happen in March. So perhaps at that point we'll see things kind of settle down, but and the nominees will all be in place, but that's still going to be an issue.
Yep.
So we'll monitor that. But let's talk about some things that are also very much in the news, and that's about the Texas House and Senate budget, along with Governor Abbott's budget. We're going to package that with vouchers and, and the governor's state of the state. So it's like a big, juicy sandwich. Homer Simpson will be very pleased. Basically, the House and Senate budgets are pretty big. Both of them are north of $300 billion if you include federal funds. 330, 320 in that category. What's interesting to me is that they're not really spending all the money that they can spend. And one of the things Governor Abbott mentioned at the State of the State was, I don't want to spend all this money, right? I want to keep us under the constitutional caps, which they have to by law, so why even say it? But it sounds really good, and I think they will do that. But there are a lot of booming needs here, and a lot of pieces of this budget. So what's going on in the budget? What are some things that you kind of were picking up on?
I mean, obviously, we have school vouchers about right now, SB 2, Senate Bill number 2 that it talks about vouchers. The House hasn't come up with theirs version, so far. It's about $1 billion, right? And it's a cap in terms of the number of students. But once again, is the question about how that money is going to be distributed and what happens if suddenly the millions of kids decides to take that. That the price tag of that thing could go to billions and billions of dollars, $50 billion, right? A year. So that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
And it's possibly more money than the state has, which is even worse.
Absolutely. So how that bill is going to turn out at the end, who knows? It has to go to the House. There's going to be something, I don't know what's going to happen.
The Senate has violated a cardinal rule of negotiation, which is don't make the first move, right? And so they made the first move. And I want to talk about vouchers in a second for sure, because that's like a policy issue that's going to be expensive, but also really politically fraught. So that's definitely one piece of this. Governor Abbott's also asking for a lot of stuff in his budget, much of which probably will get passed. He wants to raise the cap on personal property exemption for small businesses. So if you're like a dentist and you have like, you know, kind of, you have like property that kind of belongs to the business, he's going to increase that cap. That's going to be possibly pricey. He wants to increase special ed. He wants to increase teacher pay, school safety, career and technical ed, $5 billion for the grid. It's a lot of money here. Is the state writing too big a check? Is this going to bounce? What do you think?
I mean, eventually.
Yeah.
I think eventually. I mean, the way that I see it is, everybody is for increasing teacher space at 1,000%.
This all sounds really good,
right? But there's other stuff that I think like I don't know if we should be spending on these things. For example, border security. About $6.5 billion is going to be destined to border security, wall, et cetera, Well, we don't know how effective Operation Lone Star State have been in reality. We had. With the operation already years in, the biggest immigration crisis during the Biden administration. And it's like, is it working? It's not working? And we have put a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a great question.
A lot of money, billions of dollars into that. And those billions of dollars could have gone somewhere else. So the way that I think about spending is what is the opportunity cost that we are leaving behind? So if I spend $100 on this thing, what could I have done differently and spend those $100 on something else? And for me, the something else has to do with the grid and has to do with water infrastructure. Yes, water infrastructure is there. There's going to be the water reserve fund or something like that. But in my mind, we are 5 minutes into the fourth quarter. And now it's like, oh, we're going to spend $1 billion in water infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, 5 minutes into
Yeah.
the fourth quarter, you have two
Well-
timeouts. I don't think that $1 billion is going to be enough. And in 10 years,
Yeah.
we're going to spend what we have spent already in one session on border security, on water infrastructure,
Yeah.
that we are very, 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 very behind.
Yeah. Well, in your scenario, are you winning or are you losing the game, right? Because if you're losing the game, the strategy is different than if you're winning the game.
No. We're losing the game in terms of infrastructure, 100%.
Yeah. I think that's right. And that's the question is like kind of where you prioritize that money. Now, Governor Abbott has asked for this money back from the federal government. Basically, he says, here's a bill for $11 billion.
Right.
Like, can we have our money back, please?
Right.
I don't think they're going to get that money or even a fraction of it. But I do think that underscores the reality of this, that Texas has spent a lot of money on this. And we need the money, right? And part of the reason that we need the money is that there's a kind of structural imbalance here potentially, right? So I want to talk about vouchers in a second, but it potentially kind of leaves this lingering kind of money that has to be paid every week, right? It's like you have a subscription to this thing, you have to pay it every week, whether your income goes up or down. The problem is for the controller, they implied that there was some serious flattening of the Texas economy. So just a couple of numbers here. The all funds revenue was about $180 billion. It was down 3%. Sales tax have gone down by a little bit, and then their kind of overall tax collections was basically flat. The controller's report says that overall that the state's economy is basically okay, but flat. And the question is, how that's going to play into this idea that they need to have this additional revenue kind of constantly upping the kind of budget coffer so that they can pay for this.
Correct.
Now, the rainy day fund's really flush. It's as high as it's ever been. It's too high, in fact, right? The cap is there, and so they're going to have to spend that money potentially on something. And so water is definitely a big ticket item, but they're also pushing vouchers, right? And so obviously Greg Abbott's pushed a lot of money into the voucher story, but the voucher story is really compelling. It is a kind of major political narrative that's going to shape this session. Governor Abbott talks about this in the State of the State. He has a bunch of things we'll talk about in a second, but vouchers is basically the whole deal. The state Senate's plan, like you said, has $10,000 per person. It's got $11,500 for students with disabilities, $2,000 for people who are homeschooling, and $1 billion cap. The House and Senate have the same kind of cap.
Correct.
That's a lot of money, but there's more. The fiscal note says that the increase could end up being about $4 billion in the next biennium, which is a lot bigger than what they've already budgeted for.
Absolutely.
And that number is no doubt going to get bigger. Now, people look at Arizona and they say they budgeted to be kind of this certain number, the certain amount of money, but the problem is that it ended up exceeding that greatly. So now a place like Arizona that needs water infrastructure the same way Texas does is having to take money from the water infrastructure program to put into public schools. That's not where Texas wants to be. So it's a conundrum, right? For Republicans too. Republicans also look at the fiscal note that says that you've got to have an extra 400 or 500 people to implement this. And they say, that's not small government, right? So lots of questions here about what vouchers are going to end up doing and like, will the specific bill pass?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And then is it going to be the same thing as property tax? Yes, nobody likes to pay taxes.
Right.
I understand that homeowners need a reprieve. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's things that need to be done in terms of local government, tax raises, but it's all about, you cannot see them independently. It's about everything
It's all
else.
together.
I mean, it's all together in terms of local government's autonomy, local governments in order to make informed decisions, et cetera, that have been curtailed by the state legislature.
Yeah.
So having that, then having vouchers, et cetera, is, if you want to send your kid, which private institution is $10,000?
Yeah. You're still going to have to kick in extra money.
Absolutely.
And that gets expensive for families. Now,
but then that is how the target population that is going to use this money, right?
Yeah.
May not necessarily be
Yeah.
equal or across the entire population.
Yeah. Now, the Senate bill has 20% set aside of this money for people who currently in private schools.
Correct.
And those are people who are already,
Right.
they probably have the money already.
Yes.
Then 80% is set aside for people who are in public schools who want to move to a private school. Those are the people who have to come up with the extra money because $10,000 may not go the whole way. That could be an issue. That could be fixed, right? And the Senate, of course, has its bill and their priorities, but that could change. But this is basically a huge check that they've written that may not have like the money to back it up, at least in 5 years, right? Now, initially it is because the state's flush happily, but that may not last forever. So that economic growth could be potentially problematic. And we'll see. The other thing is I want to make note is that the controller is in charge of watching this money. Do they have the capacity to do that? We don't know. And this includes things like whether or not like your homeschool kids are using the right materials and that material is justifiably written off in this bill from this money. And that's unclear that the controller has that capacity right now. So again, expanding government is going to be part of this, and some Republicans are balking. But speaking of Republicans and joyous accolades for Governor Greg Abbott, he had a huge list of things he wants to do. Now, the governor over the last few years has gotten more or less what he wants, rising from, say, mid-80s to about 90% of the time he's getting what he wants. But he shrunk his agenda, so he's basically kind of aim small, miss small. But this is a big agenda. What struck you in the state of the state that was interesting that you weren't expecting?
Well, I mean, in reality, nothing struck me that I said, well, this is completely different from what
like
what the Senate and the House want. I think there's just different adjustment and different perspectives, but I think that in terms of public policy issues, they're pretty much aligned.
Yeah.
Once again, border control or immigration control, water infrastructure, the grid. We have issues about school vouchers or ESA, educational savings accounts, increasing teachers' pay. Nothing really that I said. Well, the only thing that was interesting to see was the creation of a cyber command in San Antonio that I thought, that could. I mean, that's very neat. And then the revamp of nuclear energy production, which is also a very interesting way of things because nuclear energy, in terms of how it's evolving, has evolved a lot today. So that's something interesting to watch.
It's an achievable agenda, but a familiar agenda. Lots of greatest hits here. He'll get a lot of this, but not all of it. So we'll see.
And we're going to keep track of these and many other items in the following week. But be sure to follow us on our digital updates midweek. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. The party keeps up next week.